We're in session number 98. Actually, this is session number 97, split into two because it ran for well over an hour. So we're split those up into two. That's why I may look a little bit different right now, because I'm filling in between where we split the two. We're still looking at the first 8 to 10 verses of each of the four Gospels, Mark chapter 16, Matthew chapter 28, Luke chapter 24, and John chapter 20. He is risen, revealed. I think we called the last one, He is risen, but at that point where we cut that slot last time, number 97, we had not yet been told that Jesus was risen. Today we will get in there. A bit of review first before we continue with the women who remained in the tomb after finding it empty and after Mary, from our perspective anyhow, bolted and left. Once again, let's just take a quick review. A group of perhaps 5 or more of the women who followed Jesus from Galilee, they walked from Jerusalem to the tomb, beginning before dawn, it's still partially dark, and arriving at the tomb at about dawn. The stone had been rolled away by an angel, and there was an earthquake. The guards were of no concern at that point. They were like dead men, even if they were still there. We don't know that. The women entered and found the tomb empty. Mary Magdalene bolts. She runs from the group and from the tomb, running to report to Peter and John. To that point, there was no indication the women had seen any angel. But after Mary Magdalene bolted, the angels were introduced to the scene inside the tomb. So let's go to that moment. Again, we also are making part of our assumption that she went with the group is her use of the we here. So I don't know if that is truly an implication of that or not. It may mean she's with the people when the tomb was discovered empty. It may not. Mary Magdalene's failure to mention angels seems to imply that she was not present when the angels appear to the other women. She surely would have mentioned the angels to Peter and John. Since John doesn't mention a vision of angels by Mary, it seems very likely that Mary Magdalene saw no angel when she arrived at the tomb, whether it was before the other women or with them, and that she fled the scene before seeing any angel. So what we're saying is this. Our view is the women got together, took off just before dawn in the dark, heading out, wondering how they were going to get into the tomb. When they got to the tomb, they saw it was already open. They went in, and they saw the tomb was empty, no mention of angels by them to this point. Mary Magdalene jumps ship and takes off for finding Peter and John. Again, who was the they that Mary believed had taken the body? Who knows? We might get a clue later. I don't know. We'll check on that. But when she bolted out from the other women, other women, apparently stayed at the tomb, wondering what had happened. Since some of those ladies were mothers, may have been older and couldn't keep up with Mary. We don't know. You can go on forever guessing about what happened. But what we do know is what we say or believe happened has to fit what is actually said. And what Mary's leaving the group does not violate anything the four Gospels have said. Nor does Mary's going individually first. But remember, somehow the tomb had to be rolled back by the angel before she got there, whether by herself or with the others. And the assumption, of course, is that she was the youngest of the women, and therefore the others maybe couldn't have kept up with her. I couldn't have. Since she had been rid of demons, and remember, told in Scripture that Jesus exorcised 7 demons from her, she may have had less tolerance for supernatural mystery. Maybe those things scared her more. That's why she bolted and ran, as we claim, or as we assume. We can't claim it as fact. It's after the discovery of the empty tomb that the angels apparently are first seen by the women, not by the guards. The guards saw them when they rolled the stone back or when they arrived. I'm not sure the guards ever actually saw them roll the stone or not. How quickly did they pass out? Don't know. Look at Mark 16:5. Then as they, the women, went into the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. This now, the so-called angel dressed in a white robe is now inside the tomb. Mark skips the fact that the women first noticed it was empty before they noticed the angel. Okay? Luke 24:4 and 5 says this. While they were perplexed about it, so no, now Luke is saying they have already seen the empty tomb. Suddenly, 2 men stood beside them in dazzling attire. Now Luke says there are 2. I guess one on the right, one on the left. The women were terribly frightened, as were the guards, and they bowed their faces to the ground. But they didn't pass out, apparently, like the guards did. Got more capability of dealing with the supernatural as followers of Christ, perhaps. We don't know. Luke is the one making it plain that the women had noticed the missing body before seeing the angels, which is the point we're saying at which Mary Magdalene left. And that would jive with Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. None of them has a version that would say that could not have happened. And she is the only one to use the term body. We haven't seen any reporting by the other women yet. They're still in the tomb. But Mary has said they've taken his body. She still believes he's dead, not resurrected. The angels are described differently by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but all 3 of the gospel writers are most certainly describing angels, even though one says man or men. Now, some people argue about the sitting and standing position of the angels. Matthew says that his angel was sitting on the stone, but that was before the women's arrival, and he makes no claim as to the length of time for which his position or his visibility was. He doesn't say this man was sitting throughout the whole tomb episode. See visible on the rolled back stone. No, he doesn't say that. He just says he sat on it after he rolled it. How long? We don't know. But we can gather he didn't stay there. Mark says that his angel was sitting, but does not say that he kept that position throughout the visit. Matthew and Mark may have referred to the same angel or not, because Luke says there were two. But one of them was probably the spokesman who did all of the talking. The senior angel, if you please. Luke's claim to two angels isn't a contradiction with Mark and Matthew's reference to only one. Likely the one acting as spokesman, and one did not. If there were two angels, there was at least one. Neither Mark nor Matthew declared that there was exactly one angel. That's a very simple thing in mathematics. If you say, do you have a dollar bill? If you have $100 bills, you still say yes to a simple question, a simple answer for a simple question. You have more than one, but you do have one if you have more. Some point out that Jewish law required two witnesses. That's from Deuteronomy 17:6, I think it is. I say I think it is. Looking at my note that says it is. That you need two legal witnesses to an event. Well, maybe that's why Luke says there were two of them. No human eye witnessed the resurrection, which had to take place while darkness lingered. There's no indication anyone saw Jesus leave the tomb through the stone, through the dirt or granite or whatever, or through the open window, the open entrance. Mark 16, verses 6 and 7. We are making progress, folks. It seems like it's painful, but we are making progress. We're only an hour almost into it, so we will get there. We're probably 80% of the way there now. In Mark 16, 6 and 7. But he said to them, and this is the angel who is speaking, don't be alarmed. He's speaking to the group of women, evidently without Mary Magdalene at this time, whether she went individually, separately, or ran before the angel started in. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. So Mary Magdalene was wrong. She was right that the tomb was empty, but she was wrong. His body was not taken by others. Look, there is the place, and the angel was showing the women, there's the place where they laid him down. But go, tell his disciples, even, especially if you want to, Peter. Tell Peter, Jesus, is going ahead of you guys into Galilee. The guys isn't in there, of course. But go tell his disciples, even Peter, that Jesus, is going ahead of you into Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you. So this isn't the first time that Jesus told them he would meet them in Galilee, apparently. Mark's the only writer who reports that the angel said specifically, the one crucified has been raised. Mary Magdalene says his body's been taken. they took him. Mark says he's been raised. But Luke says Jesus was living. Luke 24:5. The women were terribly frightened at the sound of the vision of the angels, and they bowed their faces to the ground. But the men, the angels, said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" So Luke didn't say or use the word resurrection, but he said Jesus lives. Matthew 28:8. What happened? So they, the women, left the tomb quickly. The minute they heard that, they took off with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. They wanted to get back and report the empty tomb and Jesus' resurrection. Remember, Mary Magdalene, reporting to Peter and John, didn't know about the resurrection. She didn't talk about the resurrection, only the empty tomb. Mark 16:8. Then they, the women, went out and ran from the tomb for terror, and bewilderment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone. I assume that means anyone along the way, because they were afraid. He said this scared the women. Luke 24:8. Then the woman remembered Jesus' words. So the women were afraid, they were scared because of all of what's going on with these angels, what they're being told, what they're being let in on, and they remembered that Jesus had said he would rise in 3 days. Interestingly, they were earlier at the cross while 10 of the 11 apostles were MIA. Only John was standing with the women, as far as we know. The women were chosen to be the first witnesses to the resurrection, even though in a Jewish court of law their testimony would not be accepted. Jesus didn't worry about some of those niceties. He said, these women have been faithful, following me from all the way from Galilee. They are true believers. They're going to find out first. While all this has been taking place, Mary Magdalene, according to our version, has finished her report to Peter and John, and when she did, the two men responded quickly. Look at Luke 24:12a. This one I am taking a little bit out of order, and you'll see when I get to John why I would do it. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. He bent down and saw only the strips of linen cloth. So even when Peter got up and ran, according to Luke, all he saw was the empty tomb. Well, that's actually in agreement, partially, with John 20, verses 3 through 7. John writes this, Then Peter and the other disciple, that'd be John himself, set out to go to the tomb. The two were running together. But the other disciple, that's John, ran faster than Peter. John was faster than Peter, and he reached the tomb first. John bent down and saw the strips of linen cloth lying there, but he didn't go into the tomb. So John now knows the tomb's empty, even though he hasn't been inside yet. Then Simon Peter, who had been following him, arrived, and as Peter is wont to do, went right into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen cloth lying there, and the face cloth. So he's adding more detail because he's inside looking, which had been around Jesus' head. They're laying there, not lying with the strips of linen cloth, but rolled up in a place by itself. Peter sees the entire clothing and preparation materials, strips of cloth, all the spices and everything. He sees them all neatly in place. He still has not seen Jesus. No one has. The emotion that caused Peter and John to run to the tomb verifies their innocence of any charge that they had stolen the body. Why would they run to the tomb if they'd stolen it? They wouldn't know it was empty. If they had stolen the body, they would have known that Mary's report was accurate, and they wouldn't have had to run to the tomb to verify it. They were as confident as anybody at what, or confounded as anyone at what they saw. They did not know precisely what it meant. They still do not have any word of the word resurrection. John 20:8, 9, and 10. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first came in. John follows Peter, and he saw and believed. What did he believe? Did he believe that Jesus was resurrected, or did he believe simply that the tomb was empty? We don't know. Look at verse 9. For they did not yet understand the scripture that Jesus must rise from the dead. So here, even after Mary Magdalene's report, their own checking of the tomb, they don't know about resurrection. And it says in verse 10, so the disciples went back to their homes, plural. Does that mean their homes in Galilee? I don't think so, but it means to wherever they were staying. So evidently, Peter and John were not overnighting in the same place. Possible. Not important to me, but possible. And in Luke 24:12, second half of that verse says, then he, Peter, went home wondering what had happened. Those two guys still don't know that Jesus is resurrected. The women do now. They've been told that he is resurrected. No one has seen him yet. What did the two men see? Very simply, grave clothes still in their original wrapped state, the strips still wrapped, with the spices in place, wrapped just as Joseph and Nicodemus had wrapped him. The head cover neatly laid aside, still wrapped in the still wrapped configuration of burial, as if Jesus had simply passed through his grave clothes. Compare this against what one would have seen as Lazarus came out of the tomb when he was raised by Jesus. Lazarus was still wrapped in his burial clothes. Lazarus had not been changed in form to where he could simply pass through those clothes. But here, apparently, Jesus simply passed out of the burial clothes. Note, Peter and John arrived at the tomb in daylight. They didn't go in the dark, because Mary Magdalene went in the dark, got there when it was light. She went back and took time to find Peter and John, reported to them. They took time to run back to the tomb, so it's well lit. They didn't go to the wrong tomb. They didn't have any trouble seeing what was there and what was not there. So the idea that these guys were confused doesn't hold much water. The conditions the men witnessed disprove any theory that grave robbers took the body. Can you see grave robbers taking the time to unwrap the body and place and wrap the grave clothes back up again, including the headcloth? If there were grave robbers, they would not take time to do any of that. They just would have grabbed the body, stripped it somewhere, either there or on the way. John admits that prior to this point, they hadn't really understood, Peter and John hadn't, that Scripture foretold the necessity of the resurrection, even though Christ told them he would come back from the dead. When John subsequently entered the tomb and examined the entire scene that Peter was studying, he understood something. He certainly believed Mary's report of the empty tomb. He knew the tomb was empty. He's the first one recorded as believing something, even though he hadn't seen the resurrected Christ, nor did he immediately understand the connection with Scripture. So did he know about this resurrection? We can't say no for sure, but we tend to believe he still didn't understand. Psalm 16:10 is one scripture John might have remembered, but apparently he did not. Psalm 16:10, you will not abandon me to Sheol. You will not allow your faithful follower to see the pit. As for Peter's understanding, we don't know exactly what he understood. It's not clear whether Luke's version of Peter's visit to the tomb in Luke's 24:12 is the same visit motivated by Mary Magdalene's report, or whether it was a second visit that we have no details about. I suspect it's a shortened version of the same visit. Some manuscripts do not include verse 12 from Luke. They don't have verse 12 about Peter's running to the tomb in it. So was that an addition by somebody else later? We don't know. Meanwhile, the women have left the tomb. Apparently before Peter and John got back. Matthew 28:8. So the women left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. So Matthew is said they got two emotions hyping them up: fear, joy. Mark 16:8, then they went out and ran from the tomb, for terror and bewilderment had seized them. Mark doesn't key on joy. And they said nothing to anyone, apparently along the way, because they were afraid. So the women, though, do go back to report. So they had great joy because they have just gone through a supernatural experience. It indicates that they probably now understood that Jesus was alive, he was risen, and that nobody took his body out of the tomb, he took it out himself. There are two possibilities with the verses. These women ran from the tomb but not report immediately. Rather, they reported later after their accounting with Jesus. That's one possibility. The other is they did report immediately, well before Jesus' appearance to them. In that case, it would seem reasonable that they left after making that report and headed back out again so Jesus could find them, even though he would have known where they were, certainly. We take the position that they did make a report before Jesus met them, which means they had to go back out again. And this is another question. After that, did Mary Magdalene meet up with them? Who knows? Luke 24:9, and when the women returned from the tomb, they told all these things, that included what the angels said, to the 11 and to all the rest. So wherever this meeting was taking place, there were more than the 11 inner circle disciples of Jesus. There were others still who also were still following Jesus. Maybe even the Emmaus Road 2 men, and we'll see that somewhere along. One of the Emmaus men, Clopas, C-L-O-P-A-S, is speaking to Jesus. I'm going to jump ahead a bit to the Emmaus roads and see what Clopas, or Clopas, whichever, I don't know, what he said to Jesus. Furthermore, and his speaking to Jesus. Furthermore, some women of our group amazed us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back and said they had seen a vision of angels who said he, Jesus, was alive. So when these women reported to the 11, apparently these two guys from Emmaus were there. It doesn't sound like they picked up what they had said from somebody else. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb. That would have been Peter and John, and found it just as the women had said. Empty tomb, vision of angels, but no word resurrection. Isn't that interesting? But they did not see him, Jesus. He said, when they reported they had not seen him. That would mean whatever he knew of Mary Magdalene's report didn't include seeing Jesus either. So before the two men left Jerusalem, they heard that the women's, plural, report of the empty tomb and the angelic visitation. Mary M. probably had reported to P and J, Peter and James, Peter and John rather, who had verified Mary Magdalene's account of the empty tomb, but they had not seen Jesus either. They did not specify that any women reported having seen Jesus. So evidently this is sometime now these women are back out on the street and Jesus is going to appear to them. Well, we're going to see that next time. Okay? We're going to see the unfolding this story. So, think of it. What have we said? They started as one group, maybe as many as 5, 6, 7, headed for the tomb. They had purchased spices to take along because they expected to find Jesus' body in the tomb. Sometime before before they were on the way in the dark, the angel had appeared, an earthquake had taken place, the angel had rolled the stone back, and the guards had passed out as if dead. Then the women continued on to the tomb. There was no visible angel. They went in after finding the tombstone rolled back. They saw the body gone. Mary Magdalene ran from it immediately, went back and reported to Peter and John. The women stayed, heard the angels, saw them, heard them, and then they left. Sometime after the women left the tomb, Peter and John arrived at the tomb, verified the tomb was empty, and they left. So now we have all of this reporting. Evidently the women are back out on the street, and Jesus is prepared to meet them. It ain't getting any easier, folks. It takes some doing to put these things together. And as I said, I know of at least 7 ways to put it together that makes sense, is logically complicit with what the Gospels say, and consistent. So, show up next time. We'll continue and see Jesus as